All right, everyone. Thank you for tuning back in again here today to the Lone Wolf Podcast. It is the first of the month. If you've been following the channel, you know what that means. Unity through music. I have gained a lot of new viewers, some new subscribers recently. If you haven't seen these segments, I used to do these every week, once on Mondays. Now I do them usually first Monday of the month. And the whole concept has been the normal guy, the normal man and woman out there have a lot more in common and have a lot more that they can find common ground on, a lot more that they find relatable than they think. Mainstream media pits, the right and the left against each other. They kind of do this whole division thing. They keep the sides divided. They don't want you to try to unite. They don't want you to try and find that common ground. It's not profitable to them, and it makes them, if you ever figured out how bad we were all getting screwed and we found that common ground, they might actually have to run on substance and live up to it, or they wouldn't win elections. But as long as they can keep us divided, they could run off of fear. So my whole concept has been, throughout history, songs, music has influenced people in the way people look at things. Elvis in the 50s, Beatles in the 60s, and the Rolling Stones. Obviously, you had the music in the 70s, influenced 70s. The 80s influenced the 80s. The 90s influenced the 90s. And you look at how society changed, the attitudes changed, the style, the dress. Music has an influence. And so sometimes I can come out here, I can run my mouth, like I've been doing for the last minute or so, or I can do that and add a little bit of music into it, and that might reach someone in a way that me talking by myself does not. So that's been the point of these segments. I do them once a month now, first Monday usually of the month, and today we're going to go into country music, but it's not old school country. It's not even like 90s country. This song is actually released fairly recently, but it is what I still like to consider to be real country, not this old popish Luke Bryan type stuff. And if you're a Luke Bryan fan, hey, nothing wrong. You do you. I just don't consider it to be real country music. It's kind of like pop country music. Like the difference between, the pop rappers and the hardcore rappers, or those, boy rock bands and a real rock band, or someone like the difference between Nickelback and Metallica. Okay? That's kind of my take. But some of you might not know this guy at all, Whitey Morgan and the 78's. Okay? You don't hear them on the radio. They're completely kind of like an underground thing, but if you really dive into country music, you might have heard of them. But for those of you who haven't, if you like real country music, I definitely recommend go listen to some more of their songs. We've got Whitey Morgan and 78's. What Am I Supposed to Do? Let's get into it.
Job that I love to hate. Met a girl and we said our vows. Tried for a kid, ended up with two. Now it seems that they're shutting this town down. What am I supposed to do? What am I supposed to do? What am I supposed to do? When this is all I have ever known, what am I supposed to do?
All right, there's a good little place. So if you haven't already caught on, right there at the beginning, it said, dedicated to the auto workers from Detroit, Michigan. So obviously I think everyone pretty much knows what has happened to American automotive, the American automotive companies, Detroit. The car town, basically. That's where American car muscle was born, right? You know, I mean, you think of some of the legendary companies from the Michigan area that were responsible for a lot of the cars we know of. Obviously, you've got things like Ford, but I mean, some of them that are gone, some of them that you don't see anymore. One that's kind of near and dear to me, Pontiac. Why? Because I still have a Trans Am, and Pontiac was one of the General Motors brands, and the Trans Am was a big deal for a long time. You know, Smokey and the Bandit really popularized the Trans Am. But it's been decimated. It's been absolutely decimated what happened to a lot of those people in Detroit. And look at the lyrics. I made sure that I brought one a video that had lyrics on it for people to read along with. And I hired on back in 85, you know, February 28. It became a job that I loved to hate. So it's hard work, but they had their union. They had the better wages. It was tough work, but it paid the bills. It put food on the table, clothes on their back, and a roof over their head, and gave them somewhat of a comfortable blue collar. I emphasize blue collar because, as you hear often, they weren't living high on the hog, as we say in the South. But they were living comfortable enough that they weren't completely destitute and near being put in the street. So these jobs meant a lot to a lot of people. And at the time, they thought things were comfortable. At the time, you know, these jobs were around. It was the normal way of life. They hire on, just like their ancestors before them. Have some kids. Start a family. Tried for a kid, ended up with 2. And now it looks like they're shutting this town down. What am I supposed to do? I've spent all my time investing into how to do this job. I have no other skill that I can apply to an office job. I don't have capital to try to open a business. What other job is there that's going to pay me these kind of wages that my experience could get me into when all this automotive stuff is closing up? They're laying off people left and right. What am I supposed to do now? I've got a home that I'm having to mortgage and pay bills to keep. I've got kids who are counting on me for food and clothes and shelter. I got a family that's counting on me, and this could go for the man or the woman in the house, or both. They're counting on me to provide, to make ends meet, and I just had what I needed to survive yanked out from underneath me. What am I supposed to do? Kind of similar to that song from John Rich I reviewed a while back, Shutting Detroit Down. It's sad, but there's a lot of people who went through these struggles and still are. Still going through them even to this day.
I reside on the northeast side where my family settled back in 33. I sold a car just to save the house. It's getting hard to hold on to anything. Well, them union boys, they made some noise. In the end, they had to feed their families too. Them dues I paid, they can't help me now. So what am I supposed to do?
Go ahead and put another pause in right there. You know, so basically he lives in the same part of town where his family settled probably before he was even born. The family settled down in that area back in 1933, and now things are to the point, through no fault really of his own, but through the fault of our government with lousy trade deals and etc. Now he's losing his job and he's having to sell his car just to keep his house. Reference back to another Unity Through Music segment I did, a Hank Williams Jr. song, Red, White, and Pink Slip Blues, where it was kind of the reverse. I have to hide the truck in Ricky Brown, I guess is one of his neighbors, in Ricky Brown's garage over on the next block because there's a repo man to dodge, and I slip out the back door basically to go get my vehicle when I have to go somewhere. Lord, I never thought I'd live to see this day because we're going to need that truck when they come to take the house away. So it was the opposite in that scenario. But there are so many hardworking people who, thanks to a failed government, lousy leadership, corrupt politicians, and bad, just screwed up free trade deals that cost the outsourcing of so many American jobs and cost so many blue-collar working families their way of life and left them with nothing to replace that way of life with other than poverty. That's what they've gone through. They've lost their house. They've lost their car. Even if they still had a job, but they found something, and then they get to the point that they lose their car because they're living in poverty, and then they don't have a way to work because they don't have a car to get there in. They lose the job. Then they lose their house. Then they lose everything else. This country was based on you can come here and work hard, climb that ladder. And I know there's going to be people who say, well, different people had that different ways, et cetera, but we can debate on that. Here's the problem. There's still ways to climb that ladder today, but it's getting harder and harder and harder and harder to do. You've got less and less capital at your availability, and true, there's still that chance. Even you start out dirt poor, you can become someone. But the American dream that I was taught was that as long as you put in that effort, you did have that good chance. Even if you weren't rich, you could at least get one of these kind of jobs out there and provide for your family and not live in the street. And that's getting harder and harder to do. Now to get to that point, everybody in the household has to work, and probably more than one job. In a lot of these cases, especially in a place like Detroit now, cost of living. I mean, it's bad. It's just absolutely bad. And as he pointed out, the union boys, they made some noise, but in the end, they had to feed their family too, which means they tried to get out there and protest, but the system is so rigged, the politicians are so bought off, they've been corrupted to no end, and the corporations are going to get away with whatever they want. They got out in the streets, they waved their signs around, but sooner or later, they had to have money to feed their family, so they bent the knee and took whatever deal they could get their hands on. Then the union boys, they made some noise, but in the end, they had to feed their family too. All those dues I paid can't help me now. I paid dues to a union for all these years, only for it to wind up doing me no good when I needed it the most. God, it's a terrible feeling to have to live through something like that.
What am I supposed to do, Lord? What am I supposed to do when this is all I have ever known? What am I supposed to do? City slowly dies, and I wonder about my fate. All the sympathy on the evening news, I've had about all that I can take. I'm 45 and I got no place to hide. I got nothing left to lose. Is this what I get after all that I gave? What am I supposed to do? What am I supposed to do, Lord? What am I supposed to do when this is all I have ever known? What am I supposed to do? What am I supposed to do, Lord? What am I supposed to do? This is all I have ever known. What am I supposed to
So yeah, you know, I pay attention to those last few lyrics that you saw there. I sit by as the city slowly dies and wonder about my fate. And, you know, I've said this. For those who haven't watched an interview I did not too long ago with Joe Sheree. She first came on the show to talk about the MPP. She was one of the MPP petitioners. But she came back on to talk about the IDD waivers, you know, for disabilities in Kansas. And as she pointed out, she's got a son who has disabilities, and she had help where people could come out to the home while she went to work and could help watch over her son, like nurses and, you know, caregivers, things like that, to make sure her son would be okay. And of course, the government got involved, and that was taken away. So now she has to stay home and care for her son all by herself. They can only live off of disability money. She can't go to a job because if she does, her son's going to be home alone, and who knows what could happen. The only other alternative she's got would be to, like, put him in one of these nursing homes, which have bad conditions for people with a lot of the disabilities and things like that. And I can fully understand why a lot of people don't want to put a loved one in one of those scenarios. And so I brought this up with her. And it's not just people in Joe's situation, but it's blue-collar men and women all across the country. And they live – you wonder why the average man and woman has so many health problems. Stress. They're overloaded. We don't have the best diets as far as what we eat because we have to live within our means, which means we're not eating this bougie-ass – fancy diet shit that costs a lot more because it's all natural grown. All this shit that people have to eat what they can to survive. And in my neck of the woods, I grew up many a night eating fried bologna or a Spam sandwich. Now, if you know anything about meat, potted meat basically, that's not the best thing in the world for your diet. Now, there's people out there who will eat that stuff. That's good. Ain't nothing wrong with some Spam. I ate Spam all the time when I was growing up. But there's other people who look at that like, oh my God, you eat that shit? But regardless of whether you like it or not, the basic point is it's not healthy. It's not healthy on your body, okay? Now, to be fair, I had a grandpa, for example, who lived to be the ripe old age of 95, and this man would cook his greens with fatback or hog jowls in it, okay? I had someone tell one time, I was like, someone actually asked me, I was like, did you have a black grandpa? Because that sounds like he was cooking soul food. I don't know. Maybe he learned from a black family on how he cooked his food. All I know, it was damn good food. He would cook up some collard greens, and he would put, bacon and fatback, things like that. And it was greens, but it wasn't healthy. But hey, he lived to be the ripe old age of 95. I think he I think he earned to eat how he pleased at that point. Everybody's got to go sometime, and he lived a happy life and lived to be an old age. And I'll be honest with you, his health really didn't go downhill at all until he had a heart attack, and he was still well within his 90s when he had this heart attack. So people were like, oh, it's all that pork meat. He was like 91, 92. Come on. There's people having heart attacks that don't eat all that pork, and they're like 50s and they're 60s. So I'd say he beat the odds. But they took his driver's license, and when he couldn't get out and go about and get out of the house, he became very homebound. That's when his health went downhill. But the reason that there's so many people who have such health issues is because they live with this kind of day-to-day stress. I sit around as the city slowly dies and wonder about my fate. Joe Sheree wonders every day. The only income they have left to get by on. Is it going to be gone tomorrow because of some politician? And this is what I need to survive on. And I can't go get a job, or my son's going to be left here by himself. I could come home and find something very terrible one day, and I don't want to see that happen. That's my kid. And then there's other people out there who have disabilities themselves and draw money or whatever, and they need that help. Or they actually have a job that has good wages, decent benefits, but in the current market with the system turned upside down and a system that incentivizes outsourcing, they got to sit back and wonder, how long do I have left before I get screwed? And then there's going to be no replacement for it. Oh, you hear the government say, well, we're going to work on getting people trained and get them in programs to get another job. Learn to code. Please. You ever heard that thing about you can't teach an old dog new tricks? How you going to take a guy in his 40s or his 50s who probably never screwed around with a computer other than to make a quick Google search or something, and you're going to teach that guy to go from how to manually put car parts on a car to code? Yeah, okay. And then even a lot of those jobs are being, outsourced and things like that now too. So what am I supposed to do? People have unhealthy diets and live with it a lot of stress, and you wonder why depression is on the rise. You wonder why bad health is on the rise. You wonder why the average span of life is going down. People are living to be less old before they pass on. They're not making it to 95 like my grandpa. And for God's sakes, he lived through World War II and the sinking of 3 ships. And there's people not even making it to where he made it to. Let me put it this way. He lived through World War II, the sinking of 3 different ships during World War II, came back, had a family, and a lot of kids. 3 kids were biologically his, and then he married his second wife, his first wife, because he's technically like my step-grandpa. But he outlived 3 wives, the third, which was my grandma. The first, unfortunately, passed in a car wreck at a pretty young age, but he had 3 kids with her. He married his second wife. She had 2 kids, previous marriage. He adopted them. And then she passed. He married my grandma. And he's the only grandpa that I ever knew. My biological grandpa was dead before I was born. But he lived through all that to be 95 years old, and people aren't making it that far anymore. If that don't tell you how far the American dream has fallen, and people are so nervous about what they're going to do, what their future holds, and they're stressed out of their minds, I don't know what else really makes that point. All the sympathy, I hear all the sympathy on the evening news, and I've heard about all that I can take. You know why? Because all they tell you are thoughts and prayers are with these people. You know what? Thoughts and prayers are great. But how about a little bit of action to try to save our country, to help the people who got screwed over? No, thoughts and prayers are more effective, right? I'm a person, I've said before, I'm a Christian, but I'm not a Bible thumper, and I'll say this. You can pray for our country, but rather than seeing a church vigil pray to fix our corrupt government, I'd rather see some people take some interest and try to get rid of all these crooked politicians. I'd rather see that happen. Sometimes, I've said this to the people who say, all we got to do is pray, all we got to do is pray, all we got to do is pray. I'm of the believer, if you really believe the Lord will help you, I don't think the Lord will help anyone that's not willing to help themselves. And I've just seen too much evidence of that. If you're only reliant, and matter of fact, there's actually certain scriptures in the Bible that would reference you to that too. So if you're not going to be willing to try to get out there and make some change yourself and then ask him for help, how do you expect him to do anything? You got to take some steps here yourself, have some personal accountability, start getting out there and stop electing the people who've been screwing us over all this time. Actually try to make a change on your own before you ask for divine intervention to help. because there's some things we can do as people ourselves. The people just don't want to band together and do it. But that's been another Unity Through Music segment. I hope you enjoyed it. If you like it, make sure you hit that like button. It's going to help this video out. Drop the comments down below if you've got a suggestion for a Unity Through Music segment, perhaps for next month. Give me some suggestions. I'm open to pretty much any genre as long as I can get into the lyrics. It might be something that I review, whether it be rap, rock, heavy metal, classic rock, country, even old country or whatever. The only thing I would say is, because I pretty much have a broad genre, but if we're getting into something like jazz, I don't know about that. But you know what? If you got one, I'll check it out. And if I think the lyrics are good and I can get into it and break a message down like this, I might just review it. So drop those comments below. We'll see you next time right here on the Lone Wolf Podcast. Y'all take care.